On the afternoon of February 26, 2025, two maintenance workers arrived at a home inside the gated Santa Fe Summit community outside Santa Fe, New Mexico. They were there to do routine work on the property belonging to Gene Hackman, the two-time Academy Award-winning actor known for films like The French Connection, Unforgiven, and Hoosiers, and his wife, Betsy Arakawa, a classically trained pianist he had been married to for more than 3 decades. What the workers saw through a window stopped them cold. They alerted the community's security guard, who called 911. "No, they are not moving," the caller told the dispatcher. "Please send someone out here quick." When Santa Fe County Sheriff's deputies arrived, they found Arakawa on the bathroom floor near the home's entrance, dressed in a sweatshirt and sweatpants. Hackman was found in a mudroom near the kitchen, a cane and a pair of sunglasses near his body. One of the couple's 3 dogs, a Kelpie mix named Zinna, was found dead inside a closed crate near Arakawa. The other 2 dogs, Bear and Nikita, were alive and had apparently been moving freely in and out of the house through an open door. It was actually these 2 dogs who led investigators to discover Hackman's body in a separate part of the home. There was no forced entry. There was no sign of a struggle. And yet nothing about the scene made immediate sense. 2 people, married for over 30 years, dead in different rooms of the same house, with no clear indication of when either of them had died relative to the other. It would take weeks of forensic work, a full toxicology screen, an environmental assessment of the property, and a public records fight before anything resembling a clear picture emerged. Unlike the version of this story that circulates in parts of the internet, one that imagines the Hackman property as a disguised government installation with underground bunkers and hidden vaults, the real property was, according to public reporting, a large but unremarkable estate in a private residential community. It sat behind normal gates common to upscale developments in the area, not the kind of fortified perimeter associated with diplomatic compounds. There is no public record court filing, sheriff's report, or credible news investigation describing reinforced tunnels, underground chambers, or hidden library passages anywhere on the property. What investigators did find, once they were inside, were details that pointed toward a slower and sadder unraveling than any single dramatic event. A search warrant affidavit described an open prescription bottle near Arakawa's body, with pills scattered across a bathroom countertop, later identified by the medical examiner as thyroid medication that had been taken as prescribed and was not a factor in her death. Investigators also noted signs of decomposition on both bodies, and in Arakawa's case, a degree of mummification in her hands and feet, which became one of the key pieces of evidence in establishing how much time had passed since her death. Early on, deputies floated the theory that the couple might have collapsed suddenly, close together in time, possibly from a gas leak or carbon monoxide exposure. That theory didn't hold. Officials confirmed that both Hackman and Arakawa tested negative for carbon monoxide poisoning. And while the New Mexico Gas Company later flagged several minor safety issues at the home during an inspection, officials said none of them were believed to have contributed to the deaths. The detail that eventually reframed the entire case was the discovery that Hackman and Arakawa had not died at the same time, not even close. Investigators, working from Arakawa's phone records, computer search history, and Hackman's pacemaker data, pieced together a timeline showing that Arakawa had died first, likely in early to mid-February, and that Hackman had lived on alone in the house for roughly another week before he died. Arakawa's last confirmed contact with the outside world was a phone call to a doctor's office. A search of her computer showed she had researched COVID-19 and flu-like symptoms multiple times in the days before her death, and investigators recovered an email she had sent to her massage therapist, noting that Hackman had taken an at-home COVID test after experiencing symptoms she described as flu/cold-like. Whatever illness had moved through the household in early February, it was Arakawa, not Hackman, whose case turned fatal first. Hackman's pacemaker data showed activity continuing for about another week after his wife's death, placing his own death several days later. Because he had been diagnosed with advanced Alzheimer's disease, medical examiners said it was quite possible, their words, offered carefully at a public briefing, that Hackman was not fully aware his wife had died and may have continued living in the home without understanding what had happened around him. That detail, more than anything resembling a hidden vault or a conspiracy, is what makes the case difficult to sit with. An elderly man, in the fog of a serious cognitive decline, alone in his home for days after the person who had cared for him was already gone. More than a week after the bodies were found, New Mexico's chief medical examiner, Dr. Heather Jarrell, held a news conference to lay out the official findings. Arakawa's cause of death was identified as hantavirus pulmonary syndrome, a rare but serious respiratory illness caused by exposure to droppings, urine, or saliva from infected rodents, most commonly deer mice, which are found throughout New Mexico. Health officials later confirmed that environmental assessment of the property had turned up dead rodents, droppings, and nests scattered across several outbuildings on the estate, including 2 small structures, 3 sheds, 3 garages, and 2 vehicles. Though notably, no signs of rodent activity were found inside the couple's primary residence itself. Hackman's cause of death was listed as hypertensive and atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease, with Alzheimer's disease named as a significant contributing factor. His autopsy showed what the medical examiner described as very extensive heart disease, including a history of multiple prior heart attacks and cardiac procedures, along with advanced Alzheimer's pathology in his brain. When asked whether starvation might have played a role in his death, given that he had apparently been alone in the house for days, Jarrell said there was no food in his stomach, meaning he hadn't eaten recently, but that he showed no clear signs of dehydration either, leaving that detail somewhat unresolved. Officials were direct in stating that neither death showed signs of trauma, internal or external, and that both were ultimately classified as natural causes. That classification, 2 natural deaths, days apart, in a home where one spouse didn't realize the other had died, is unusual enough on its own that it drew intense public attention without needing any embellishment. One phrase from the original search warrant affidavit fueled a lot of public speculation in the days immediately following the discovery. Investigators wrote that they considered the circumstances surrounding the death of the 2 deceased individuals to be suspicious enough in nature to require a thorough search and investigation. That language, on its own, sounds ominous. In context, it reflects standard procedure anytime 2 people are found dead together under circumstances that aren't immediately explainable. It does not imply investigators believed foul play was likely, and nothing in the subsequent months of reporting has surfaced evidence of it. The dog's death added another layer of public concern. Zina, the dog found dead in a closed crate near Arakawa, could not have escaped or found food or water once shut in. Officials said a necropsy was conducted, though the specific cause of the dog's death was not immediately released to the public in the same detail as the human autopsies. Veterinary officials did note, in the context of the hantavirus finding, that dogs are not known to contract illness from hantaviruses, which meant the dog's death and Arakawa's illness were treated as unrelated events tied instead to being confined without care once she was no longer able to look after the animals. Because the case drew such intense public interest, a dispute emerged over how much of the investigative record, including photographs and video from inside the home, should become public. The Hackman estate petitioned a Santa Fe court to block the release of sensitive material entirely, including images of the couple's bodies and the dog's remains. A district court judge ruled at the end of March 2025 that most investigative records, including autopsy and toxicology reports, could be released publicly, as is generally required under state public records law, but ordered that especially graphic imagery of the bodies be obscured in anything released. The judge denied the estate's request to seal the broader case file altogether. That ruling is part of why so much detailed information about the case, pacemaker data, search history, environmental assessments, specific affidavit language, became available to journalists and the public in the first place. It is a fairly ordinary example of how public records law interacts with a high-profile death investigation, not evidence of any unusual cover-up. In the months following the deaths, a wave of online content, some of it framed as documentary-style investigation, complete with invented federal agents, fabricated quotes, and imagined discoveries of hidden vaults, sealed iron doors, and mysterious symbols, circulated widely. None of it is supported by any court filing, sheriff's report, medical examiner's statement, or credible news investigation. There is no public record of a hidden tunnel beneath the property, no vault, no German ledger, no unexplained symbols, and no sealed door with detectable airflow behind it. These are fabricated narrative elements, not documented findings. What actually happened to Gene Hackman and Betsy Arakawa is, in its own way, a story that doesn't need embellishment to be affecting. It's a story of a 95-year-old man in the advanced stages of Alzheimer's, living out his final days in a house where his wife of more than 3 decades had already died of a rare illness she likely contracted from rodent exposure somewhere on their rural property, and the strong possibility that he never understood she was gone. It's a story about how illness, isolation, and cognitive decline can combine in ways that leave almost no trace until it's far too late for anyone to help. The real record, autopsy reports, pacemaker logs, search warrant affidavits, and a court's ruling on what the public was entitled to see, tells that story clearly enough on its own. Even with an unusually detailed public record for a case like this, a few questions were never fully answered. Investigators were not able to pin down an exact date for Arakawa's death with certainty, only a likely window based on her last outgoing communications. Officials also did not fully explain, in public statements, exactly how the rodent exposure occurred, whether inside one of the outbuildings in the surrounding landscape or during some specific activity Arakawa had undertaken on the property in the days before she fell ill. And while Hackman's pacemaker data established roughly when his heart stopped, it obviously cannot say what he understood or experienced in his final days alone. Those are the honest gaps in the story. The kind that come from reconstructing someone's final days after the fact, not from any deliberate concealment. They're also, in the end, a more human kind of unresolved than any invented tunnel or sealed vault could be. The record we do have paints a picture of 2 people who lived a private, unassuming retirement in the New Mexico high desert and whose deaths, however difficult to piece together, were ultimately explained by rare illness, long-standing heart disease, and the cruel arithmetic of Alzheimer's, not by anything hidden beneath the floor of a library.